Thank you so much, and thank you for your submissions, your very detailed submissions from each and every one of you. I suppose I really welcome that we've been able to bring so many of the representative groups and the unions here today to speak to us about mental health. I suppose a number of us that are on this committee sit on the Education Committee, and like myself also sit on the Mental Health Committee, which is a brand new subcommittee out of the Health Committee. And I suppose we see a lot of concerns been raised, particularly over the 2 years of the lockdown of COVID. I suppose for me, I have a couple of questions, and maybe just I might pose those, and hopefully we have time for a little bit of a response. But as you've mentioned in some of your submissions, and I would agree with you, the transition phase is crucial, particularly going into first class, going into first year, going from secondary school into third level. So that transition period, I very much agree, is a huge issue. And I think that was mentioned as well, Moira, under ASTI, I think you were mentioning that as well. I suppose I just have a couple of questions around the summer programme. For me, it's about the investment we're seeing coming from the budget now into education. I mean, there's 9.6 billion going into education. They're looking at nearly as a 2.6 going into special education. You know, we're looking at nearly 40,000. You're looking at close to 20,000 SNAs, close to 20,000 special education teachers coming into the system. And I know, you're here as well, Gary, and you're representing obviously the SNAs here. And the courses that have been rolled out from UCD, I mean, I want to see them enrolled out around the country. And if we're going to tackle getting 20,000 people their well-deserved qualifications, you know, that has to happen. And I think the Minister is very much along those lines about how we see that being rolled out. And for me, of course, representing Roscommon Galway, I want to see an awful lot of it in the West as well. But the amount of people that are coming into the system, the school system, and how that's been managed as a teaching staff, like that there's a cohort of teaching staff working with the special education teachers, the teacher, the mainstream teacher in the classroom, the SNA support. I suppose my question maybe for you, Gary, is I would like to see a more streamlined, and I think I do see it in the schools that I deal with in my own constituency and that level. But I suppose, would you have any other maybe comments on that? Maybe for ASTI and INTO, please. I might just ask the questions around the summer programme. Like, we've just announced funding on that, and we're seeing maybe a quarter of schools taking part. I've contacted schools in my own area. I've had very good feedback from a number of principals about the impact of those 2 weeks, particularly for those schools. Are there any other challenges? Because we have budget. We now have this extra capacity coming to schools. They've also opened up that maybe student teachers in different cohorts could be involved. I suppose, is there anything there that we're going to see with schools maybe coming on board this year? It'd be great to see a real increase in that. And are there any other challenges on that we need to be conscious of? And I suppose that really helps with that transition piece, to my mind, that transition piece where you're bringing students in over that summer period. I suppose the funding models and the pilot programs and so on, like that's crucial, because most initiatives that we see come from pilots. Like the initiatives that we've seen at third level come from pilot programs. We're seeing technological universities been rolled out. That's been absolutely amazing in terms of delivering excellence to the regions. But again, in order to do that, I mean, I know we've spoken here about mental health supports. We have to look at how we deliver health in a different way. So much of this now is coming through telehealth. So much of this has been accessed in a virtual way for early intervention. We need to look at how we change how we deliver healthcare sometimes at a very early stage. And I suppose I'm very interested in maybe some comments on that as well, because I know the 50808 text number is a 24/7 number that's absolutely crucial for anyone going through anxiety or any type of stress. The changes that we see in the rollout of the Leaving Cert programme, again, is something that we've been fighting for, that it's not all pinned on one exam, and that doesn't deliver for all students, for all capacities and capabilities. The other questions I might have is just potentially, and whoever might like to respond, we have the action plan on bullying, and as a committee here we did a report on bullying, one of our very first reports in this committee, and that's going to be coming out, I know, from the Minister, and that there's been a number of elements that she's taken on board for that, and that there's also been the 5 million that's been rolled out for primary schools. There's been an increase, I know, in the NEPs, I think about 54 more psychologists coming on board with that. So my questions, I suppose, my questions are around the summer programme, so any comments on that, and particularly around the transition piece, and how do we increase more schools taking on that programme this year when we have the funding available for it? Maybe around the engagement, like you've mentioned, with CAMS and community teams, how do we set up a structure where the secondary school system can engage with our new sort of disability teams that we're seeing in the community space, particularly in the CHOs? And then just around the counselling supports and the action plan on bullying, each school has an ethos. And parents sometimes have to look at what the ethos of each school is, and that each school in that report, the inspector's report and their annual report, are making a reference to how they're managing bullying. This is something that hopefully with this new recommendation that comes out with the action plan, that we will see this. And I suppose just what are the comments on that? How are schools going to engage around that action plan on bullying, and how the schools are going to manage that themselves as well? So I suppose those are some of the things I think, just for me, are of interest. So Gurmil Magas. I might start with the transition. Maybe if Moira would like to speak, maybe from the ASTI point of view, I might bring in Gary on the SNAs.
If everyone could just give a brief, because I'm very conscious we have to suspend to bring in the next group, and we have to be out here by 2 o'clock.
Sorry, thank you.
I have to defer to my INTO colleague because actually at second level the July provision is not it's not the dominant space where it's provided. So I will.
But can I just ask you? Can secondary schools not provide this, or why won't secondary schools provide this?
No, it's not that they won't provide it, but the facts of the matter are that very many of the students whose parents want them to attend the July provision would be students with significant disabilities. And quite often many of those students would not be in the second level system.
I would disagree to some extent, because although there's a number of schools, so we're seeing 1 in 4 schools now that are DEIS schools that access supports, and not just for numeracy and literacy. They're accessing supports there to engage with this transition period. They're engaging with well-being, communication, isolation, all the challenges we've seen over the 2 years of lockdown that we've all spoken about today. So why don't secondary schools want to take on the summer programme scheme?
I think we may have a misunderstanding of terminology. When we in our world talk about July provision, we are talking about fairly dedicated July provision for students with significant levels of need in terms of special educational need. I suppose what we might call supplementary educational programmes, I would think it would be fantastic if more second level schools put them on. 2 reasons why they don't. Number one, it is difficult to get qualified staff to engage with them.
There's an early announcement this year, so compared to last year, which I know was a challenge, there's an early announcement this year in the last month about the summer programme. The name is now changed. So how are secondary schools, or how can we support secondary schools engaging in that programme? Because we now have an early announcement, we have the funding there. They're opening it up for students as well at different levels, at third level, graduate teachers, but also in other areas of therapy and healthcare and so on. I just think there's a real opportunity there.
A practical measure, Senator, to come back to you in a time frame is, I think the first thing you need to do is talk to the management bodies. They're the people who make decisions about school opening, about putting on programmes, etc., etc. So I would say, and I don't mean to be dismissive, I'd actually,
but we would
to
have
me,
ASTI
that's what I would say. Oh, absolutely. But I think you need to have a very frank conversation with the management bodies around what they perceive as the difficulties.
Well, there seems to be very good feedback from principals around this programme, so I'm just curious around that. So thank you very much. And sorry, Maureen says thank you.